Hello and welcome. This is another interview for Headlocks and Headphones. Joining me today, I don't know really what name to call you.
Not the one you usually call me.
So see, your name is Gordon Stephen. Yeah. I call you Gordie. We have occasionally and affectionately called you Bitch, Fred, and various other names. But tonight,
you're forgetting Squeak.
Yeah, and Squeak. Basically, we had to get the basketball reference in.
Yeah.
We're just going to call you Gordie because, for the love of God, I cannot call you Gordon. That's not your real name. It's just not. I will never accept that is your real name. So we're going to get straight down to the wrestling stuff. Have you been keeping up with any wrestling during the lockdown?
No.
I've
basically what we've just been talking about for a couple of minutes.
Well, I recommend you go out of your way to check out WrestleMania. Certainly, the pre-tape things, the Boneyard match.
I've heard the Boneyard match. I haven't actually. My biggest problem is that I don't have time at the moment to actually do things. If you hear any snoring, it's actually my dog, and he's the reason I don't have time to actually do it, because I generally walk him for about 4 hours a day after work.
And you're still working during the lockdown. Yeah. You have your dog to be looking after. I have my own version of a puppy called Dylan, who's 2 years old, who's actually a little boy, not a puppy.
It's more or less the same thing, except at some point your one will actually learn how to make tea.
But eventually, even though none of us in the house drink tea, he'll learn to make
tea in the form of dinner. Not so much.
He's already learned how to make coffee for his mum. Which is a great thing because it means that we can keep her awake when she gets really tired, which is like 5 times a day, which is weird. Well, the Boneyard match definitely want to check out on night 1. Night 2, I would go out of your way to check out the Firefly Funhouse match, which is it's weird, it's insanity.
That's a thought as well. I have to get that. Just give me a second.
Okay, so whilst
you talk, I'll be right. I'm just over here.
Just over here.
Professional this bit.
Whilst Gordie is looking for, I'm sure I know what he's looking for, and he's probably. I hope he's not going to do the interview wearing the item I think he's looking for. We are at Headlocks and Headphones about interviewing people, mainly our friends. But if you want to be interviewed, then do get in touch. Headlocks and Headphones on Facebook. This is one of those things where we're all in lockdown. Although me, Gordie, my wife, and a few others, we do get to go outside. We do get to go and work and stuff. One of the things that's important is that we all kind of join in together and kind of keep ourselves occupied whilst we're in lockdown. Now, I personally have made a very big choice during the lockdown. Something which I think even my wife will acknowledge is pretty big. I'm not going out of my way to watch wrestling. I watched WrestleMania. I'm not listening to wrestling podcasts. I'm not watching a lot of the wrestling product. I am still delving into some of the old stuff. I watched WrestleMania 8 the other day, Royal Rumble 93. I've watched some of the older stuff because for me, as soon as Drew McIntyre won his title at WrestleMania, I was happy and everything else was just incidental. I didn't really care about everything else. So what was it you went away to get to show us?
Yeah. Here's the question. Should I wear it?
I certainly think at the end of the interview,
at the
end of the interview for the game section that we're going to do, I certainly think wearing the mask so you can answer them in character. But until then, we will stick with the questions and then lead into you wearing the mask. Maybe if you get scared by a question, you can stick the mask on. I don't think there's anything too bad in here, though. And to be honest,
sorry, you finish up.
To be honest, there's no questions in here that's really tough. The only issue we will have is at the end. I haven't written down the questions I plan on asking, so I have to kind of wing those. But I'm sure we'll make it in the end.
Yeah. So as I was waiting to say, wearing these gloves that make me realize either one of two things. Either Bray Wyatt has really tiny hands or I have big ass hands.
Well, you know what they say about people with big hands?
Big gloves.
Yes. Well, I'm glad
these are not.
No. Well, do you know what? It could just be like O.J. Simpson. Do we go down the O.J. Simpson route here? If they do not fit, then you must acquit.
Have you ever actually... I'm not entirely sure he's doing podcasts, but he's doing something since he's gotten out of prison.
Yeah, he's got a Twitter. I like
Twitter.
Yeah, he's interesting.
Apparently, it's very, very. it's something that everyone should actually see at some point.
He did put up a video about Carol Baskin from Tiger King. That Carol Baskin was the one that killed people, and I'm sorry, but is just hilarious. Have you seen Tiger King whilst you're here?
I don't actually want to watch it. I
No?
know what's happened in it, but I just don't particularly want to.
There is a Louis Theroux documentary on Netflix featuring Joe Exotic and a few of the other guys who are in that series. But it's one of those very interesting documentaries that Netflix are doing right now. I think Netflix are just going really heavy on documentaries because they're really cheap to make, unlike scripted television where you have a crew of 40 people. You can do it with 2 people and people who are just kind of volunteering. Right. The reason I mentioned Joe Exotic, he's actually a former indie wrestler, apparently. Yeah, which is really interesting.
I can actually see that. I'd rather not, but I can see it.
Especially if he was wearing tight Speedos. Well, we won't go
No.
Yeah, he married 2 guys in Tiger King.
In a polyamorous relationship, I know that much.
Yeah. Okay, so for those of the people watching that don't know who you are, introduce yourself so that I know we've said what your name is, but introduce yourself and why we're interviewing you today.
I don't know if I'm like your oldest friend, but I'm definitely one of your longest serving friends.
Yes, and it's not easy being a friend of mine, is it?
No. There have been many misadventures.
Misadventures is probably the best way to put it, yes. So what is your name? Just so we can officially confirm what we're meant to call you, and then I'm going to call you something different.
I really wish you wouldn't, but we got to. As you have said, I am the one and only Gordon Stephen. And we've got product placement going there.
Accidental product placement. We did forget one of your names, which I've just suddenly remembered because I can see it on the other side of the room, which is Frankie Tripod.
Yeah. To be fair, I've actually retired Frankie Tripod.
You've retired Frankie?
Yeah, he's not been used for a good long while, so he's actually retired.
That's a shame. Anybody who gets that reference, good for you. We're not going to be proving anything on this show. We're not allowed. I think YouTube don't like that very much.
They don't like a lot of things.
They really don't. That's why we're not allowed to have like proper music or anything as well. It sucks. So, what is your first wrestling memory?
That I was actually, since I've actually heard that question, I'm trying to think because I was actually hoping you would remember because it probably was related to you at some point. Just any sort of wrestling memory at all.
Yeah, because I do remember briefly talking about wrestling when we used to do a radio show at Hospital Radio, and it just didn't seem like something you were interested. So
well, I was never a big sports guy, so I never actually watched any of it. But I think my earliest memory is probably I'm not sure I should say his name, but there is someone we both know that we probably shouldn't talk about because reasons.
Yes.
He brought a lot of. Let's just say you. Probably a bigger wrestling fan than you are.
At one point, yeah, I would say I've kind of overtaken. I mean, I'm very much obsessed. You can see from the wall in the background.
Yeah. I've seen your house.
Things, and also I want to add in because it's not featured in a video yet. Let's just do it one time, very gently.
Surely it should be ding ding.
Yeah, I know, but I don't want to wake anybody up. It's really late.
Let's just get back to my memory so we can get that out of the way. So, I remember him always bringing in wrestling toys, like the classic, basically just arm-moving wrestling toys that you have a lot of.
So we can use the first name. Are we talking about Brian?
Yes, we're talking about Brian.
Okay, so there is a guy. We don't want to talk about him too much because of something he's done in recent years. However, Brian was a massive wrestling fan. He used to show up to school in wrestling t-shirts, wearing wrestling belts and stuff. So this would probably place it around about 97, 98.
Oh no, this was a lot earlier. This was in primary school. I was in primary school with him.
So he was even doing that in primary school. So
yeah.
Was he still showing up in wrestling T-shirts and
I
stuff?
can't remember T-shirts. I just remember the toys because he had my all-time favorite guy of that's the problem. Put me on the spot. My mind immediately goes blank, so I forget names immediately. But I'm thinking of Randy Savage.
Well, okay. Well, Randy Savage is one of those guys that it's hard to dislike. So your first memory is of an old associate of ours, Brian, and his love of wrestling. So what? Your first favorite wrestler?
Well, there's also I can talk about this guy because Jeffrey I went to primary school with as well, so he was also picked up on wrestling. But he was actually more into actually watching the shows and the pay-per-views rather than the toys.
Did you ever? I know you one of the interesting memories I have of our friendship is of me working for a frozen food retailer and getting a phone call from you, basically saying, "So I'm in a shop and they have a Mick Foley doll. Would you like one?" And I'm like, "Yes." And then about 20 minutes later, you showing up, handing me a Mick Foley doll and said, "Yeah, I was getting money from you next time." And I don't know why. For some reason, I just walked around the shop doing my entire shift with Mick Foley in my trolley the whole time.
I also don't remember that.
Yeah,
I did it. I just have. I have. Like, I've had lots of depression in my time, so my memory is kind of gone in a lot of places. So
I have a very strange memory. I remember things I probably shouldn't. But it was the Commissioner Foley one that actually had Commissioner written on his T-shirt as well. So would you argue your first favorite wrestler was Macho Man Randy Savage?
Yeah, it's like the flamboyant, just the tassels and the glasses and the pretty much the cowboy hat. It's just and the beard. It's just like everything was just. I didn't actually know much about him. It was just the personality you got from just looking at him.
So if that was your favorite wrestler, I'm guessing based on when you were watching wrestling, because if you've ever watched wrestling, it's been after Randy Savage stopped being a full-time wrestler.
Well, when I started obviously I never actually watched WCW. I only just watched WWE, so I never actually saw him wrestle when he was still active.
So, who would you say is the favorite wrestler that you've seen during they're active and you've got to see them then, rather than somebody you're seeing in hindsight?
Well, I would like to say Mick Foley, but he didn't. Again, that was more personality rather than him actually wrestling, because he was never one of the big. I want to say active wrestlers when he was in the ring, because he was very much slow and methodical. But,
do you know what? I think there's a place for everybody. It's meant to be a bit like a circus sideshow.
Yeah, but one of the reasons I like Mick is because he was the everyman of wrestling, in my opinion. Because he wasn't. He talks about it a lot himself. He was not built the physique that Vince McMahon wants for everyone in his shows.
I think that was one of the good things about wrestling in the late 90s. Things did change a lot, so we got to see a slightly different version of wrestling. And WWF was always about the big guy. WWE is still about the big guy. But
that's Vince.
Yeah, when you get to see the small, when you watch an NXT show, especially the NXT guys, they bust their ass, and a lot of them don't have the same stature physically. But the thing,
I put that down to Triple H rather than Vince because he's running the show.
But for me, Mick Foley tells a great story. So when somebody says to me, "Who's your favorite wrestlers?" I still stick to the same list. It's Bret Hart, Mick Foley, CM Punk. They're the three that are the top of the list, and then dotted underneath there's some other guys. But CM Punk, for all of the credit he gets as a performer, he's not a fluid technical wrestler. So I think I think you dismiss Mick Foley as not being the best in-ring talent, but you know what?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. He has definitely a good. It was more going for the technical aspect rather than anything. But definitely, whenever I watched his matches, it was always, I'm always going to watch a Mick Foley match because it's like we've always talked about. It's like the psychology of things we want to look for.
Well, see, that's the thing. I mean, for me, psychology is huge. Psychology is important. And I can watch something where it's not the most entertaining match in terms of, people being thrown through tables or set on fire. But if the psychology is right, a great example of this, if you've never seen it, SummerSlam 94, the main event, Bret Hart versus Owen Hart in a cage match. Something which I showed my first wife, she who shall not be mentioned. I showed her the cage match between these two, and she watched it. And this was in 2003, 2004. And as she's watching it, she's looking at it going, but there's no blood. There's nothing left the top of the cage. Why are you so excited about this? But by the end of the match, it's two brothers fighting each other. Their families ringside. The story tells itself. So you don't need all the bells and whistles that go with it. And sometimes, Edge has just made a return. Edge, somebody who
everyone pop for that, especially me.
Yeah,
I didn't actually. I didn't have time to watch the Rumble, but I did when I found out Edge was back. I did watch that specific scene just to see Edge, because Edge is also one of my favorite wrestlers.
The look on his face, and do you know what's funny? The connection between Mick Foley and Edge is huge, because obviously they were kind of. Mick Foley was the commissioner when Edge and Christian were actually rising up through the ranks. So it's interesting to see how closely linked some of the best wrestlers that we personally experience are.
That's like when I was watching, like, during the Attitude Era, I was a little more interested in the tag team matches rather than like the main events.
See, this is great.
Like Edge and Christian. It was like the for the benefit of those with flash photography.
Yeah, well, this is something I haven't heard before. Because a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm a Hardy Boys fan, and Dudley Boys fan, and Edge and Christian fan," but very rarely do you hear somebody say, "You know what? During the Attitude Era, I know they had Stone Cold and The Undertaker and The Rock, but I really did look more towards the tag wrestling." If you look at the tag team wrestling that they had in '99, 2000, and
like 2001, Edge and Christian, Too Cool, Kai and Tai. Oh, I love Kai and Tai.
Yes, Kai and Tai. Tiger, pick up the mic. You have something to say. I mean, one of the great. You know, Bruce Pritchard was the one who did the Indeed. Brother Love was the person who did the Indeed in the most obnoxious of ways. But one of the things that, when you mention tag team wrestling there, it makes me think, if you look at the style of wrestling we have now, particularly in AEW, particularly in smaller companies like Impact Wrestling, if you look, the wrestling we're seeing at the top of those cards is very heavily influenced by the Hardy Boys, the Dudleys, Edge and Christian. So it's interesting.
They were also. Well, I mean, they were the reason we had like TLC matches. We got the Hardys and Edge and Christian with the concerto.
I mean, I do like the fact that you're not a dyed-in-the-wool wrestling fan to the point where you have to sit and watch wrestling. So to hear somebody who is a big fan of the tag team stuff is great, because my favorite wrestler of all time is Bret the Hitman Hart, came through the tag team ranks. The inspiration for the name Anderson for me is Arn Anderson, one of the greatest tag team wrestlers of all time. British Bulldogs. Yeah, British Bulldogs, one of my favorite tag teams of all time. Everything that I look at in wrestling that I like all links back to tag teams. So it's interesting to hear that you actually have the same opinion. Now, what we're going to move on to now is live shows. So can you remember your first live show?
Sadly, no. That's what I was saying before. I was hoping you can remember it, because I can't actually remember. I know it was going to be with you, because we've always been with the live shows when they come to Aberdeen, but I can't remember which one it was.
I believe it was a SmackDown show. And again, I think my first wife was there.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain she was, but I can't remember exactly when it was. That's the problem.
I believe she got pissy, because I didn't I didn't speak to her for a little bit, because I was speaking to you at the show. And I remember we went to we went to the bar, and this was still at the point where you were drinking, but you weren't drinking.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain. The only thing I vaguely remember was that I think the Spirit Squad were there.
Yes, because was that the night that we were meant to get Roddy Piper, and we ended up getting the Highlanders instead?
Yes.
Yes.
That's my first show. At least that's the earliest I can remember.
Okay, if we were... I can't remember.
I definitely remember the hype of it being there because I remember saying, "Hey, there's Scottish guys there."
Yeah, I do remember after the show, we stood waiting to see if we could get autographs or pictures or something, and we looked up at the bus, and there's Hunter sitting, and it's obviously a tour bus, and his curtain isn't quite closed, so he looks down, and I do remember both of us kind of waving at him. He waved back, and then instantly pulled the curtain closed, like. So what? So we've been to see WWE. Obviously, we've been to see WrestleZone at least once.
I've definitely been once with you, and there was actually, I think it was a show in Elgin. I went with my ex because we were just trying to find.
Was that a WrestleZone show? Or was that somebody else?
Sorry.
Was that a WrestleZone show, or was that somebody else?
No. Actually, no. Who?
Because there was a company up in Elgin, and they've just been bought by the SWA.
No,
former members of the NWA.
No, is it WrestleZone? Is that the one that has Scotty Swift in it? I can't remember. It was definitely WrestleZone because it was definitely one of those.
Definitely that. Okay, so what's your favorite live show? Because we've been to see WWE a few times. I mean, the last one we saw back in November. Where we had, Bray Wyatt versus Seth Rollins. We had.
I do want to talk about that because I have a lot. I'm fairly certain you've actually read my opinion of it on the show a good while ago. I want to discuss it because but I want to talk about it later. To answer the question just now.
Yeah. What's your favorite live show that you've been to see? Because obviously, the WrestleZone show you together. You saw me
before that where we dressed up.
Yeah, well, I dressed up as Bret the Hitman Hart. You dressed up as
Savage.
Oh yeah, and my second wife, my present wife. I say present wife as if I'm going to have another one. I probably should delete that when this video goes live.
Oh no, keep it. I want to see the fallout.
Yeah, so she dressed as Becky Lynch. You know what? That was a fun night because I chanced my arm and reached out to Adam Pearce, a former NWA champion who was the inspiration for something called the 7 Days of Sammy, because he'd done the 7 levels of hate. And I asked him if I could get an autograph. But the autograph I said would be for my son's birthday. So we actually do have a birthday card signed by Adam Pearce and Grado, which is just amazing. You weren't there to meet Grado, unfortunately.
No. I wouldn't have actually minded meeting Grado because
Grado was cool.
He is entertaining. I will say that much.
So we'll come back to Grado briefly in a second. But what was your favorite live show?
The one where we were dressing up.
Okay. And you want to
just because we saw Nakamura beforehand. That was he was amazingly tall for what I was expecting. I don't think he's that tall.
Yeah, well, I do love the fact that his English is a lot better than people give him credit for. And the fact that he was excited to hold my NXT belt, which I still think is pretty damn cool. He actually demanded to hold the NXT title that I took to get signed, and told me, yeah, here you go, and just almost flippantly handed me the US title. The TV belt, the actual US title. I'm like, there you go, you hold this for the picture. I'm like, yes, thank you very much. So the last show we met Braun Strowman. What would you think about Braun Strowman?
He was a very chill guy. It's like because he's always depicted on the actual the TV shows as like it was all the shows I saw beforehand were just him being the big dumb, well, I won't say dumb, but the big angry guy who just like plows through everyone. Like, during that show, he was the best thing because he was so hilarious, and I like that Braun Strowman.
I really liked the part where at the start of the show, security actually said in front of us, "Keep this corridor clear because AJ Styles is going to run down here later in the show." And I remember looking at you and the wife. She won't mind me calling her the wife. I remember looking at you and the wife and going, "Oh, they have something planned for here, so this should be interesting. We're going to be right next to the action." And I really enjoyed that show. So this is your window to say anything you want to say about that show that we were at.
Okay. That show, it wasn't the wrestlers. It was the audience that really pissed me off because they weren't reacting at all. At one point, Rey Mysterio actually had to get on the mic during the match and actually talk to everyone to try and get some, like, just people pumped up. No reaction.
This is a venue for me where the sound quality was way better than the old building we had here in Aberdeen. I think
it's the new exhibition center. It was like they had a lot of space there. They could have gotten a lot more people in if they actually tried, but they just kind of.
I think we enjoyed it. I mean, the Street Profits were out there. We danced along as to the Street Profits, and I think that WWE never get enough credit for the fact that they make their shows very high quality. When you watch some of the indie shows, you have stuff that drags, and at least you know everybody that's there. I mean, especially the Drake. I mean, Drake Maverick we'll talk about briefly in a minute. The stuff with Drake Maverick was hilarious when he came out as Shelton Benjamin's partner, and you actually got to see this dynamic between Shelton Benjamin and Drake Maverick, which I thought would have been great on TV. Drake kind of feeling like he's a big guy who can do anything he wants, and he's actually not good enough to do it. I thought it was great.
Was it an 8-man or a 6-man tag that was later on in the show? I can't remember. I remember there was a bit in the show there was a lot of tag teams, but I can't remember how many were actually involved in it.
There was Street Profits. Do you know what? I can't even remember. There was Shelton Benjamin and Drake Maverick, and then there was 2 other. There was 4 tag teams involved in it.
Yeah, it's just that I really liked that match. It was so good.
And the thing is, half those guys weren't on TV every week, so it shows you maybe what. I mean, we will talk about the wrestlers that have been fired, but maybe thinning the company out a little bit might be a good thing and just get people a little bit more exposure. But what's your pet peeve about professional wrestling? What's something that you don't like whenever you tune in?
It's not so much tuning into the show. It's more. It's a lot of the fan reactions that annoy me. It's just the amount of pettiness and pickiness that I just read from the comments.
Are you talking about the stuff where people literally will turn on a wrestler for absolutely no reason at all?
No, it's more just playing about all the products that are available.
Okay. I mean, the thing is, there's something out there for everybody. Have you watched any of AEW yet?
No, but one thing I will say about AEW is I do like Chris Jericho, just for the memes.
Chris Jericho is an incredibly talented.
He knows how to react. It's like I was just watching on YouTube just like a 20-minute compilation of all the funny stuff he did. He mentions the list, and it's just like how was it? He mentions the list and it says, "Oh, it's not 2015," and he pulls out a list and it's got like I can't remember what it's actually called, but it was in French.
I think one of the things with Chris Jericho is I think he can poke fun at himself. For me, AEW, top to bottom, that card has great wrestlers. The problem for me is we're now, 6 months in, we haven't progressed any. And for all the faults WWE have, they've established Drew McIntyre, they've established Buddy Murphy, they've established Street Profits, they've established the teams and the people that we're meant to care about. We look at AEW, nobody is drastically more over. MJF was a star before he came to AEW. Sammy Guevara, MJF is definitely somebody I think you should go and check his stuff. He's the guy who there was a young fan asked to take a picture with him, and the picture that is available online is of MJF looking right at the boy's face going, it's ridiculous. But MJF is living the heel life, and I love a guy that's committed to a character.
Yeah, gotta go kayfabe. Proper old school kayfabe.
Exactly, yeah.
But just thinking just now, it's just I think maybe AEW is going to have a problem that WWE is having right now of having too many. Because basically, when wrestlers get released from WWE, the joke is that usually they'll go to AEW. They'll offer them a contract there.
Well,
I just think if they
for a long time, yeah.
But I'm just thinking because not so much just now, but they do lose a WWE do release a lot of people, and they do generally go to AEW. I think AEW are going to have the same problem WWE have of having too much talent and not enough screen time.
I know, but I mean, they had that, especially as the show was starting. One of the arguments that I've had with somebody that I'm involved with in a separate project is he's a massive point out the flaws of the product. It seems like I'm trying to bury them, when instead what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to point out that Sammy Guevara, MJF, Wardlow, Dustin Rhodes, Cody Rhodes, or Cody and Dustin, because they can't use the Rhodes name. These are all talents that are super. No, yeah, WWE own the name. But there's all these talents that are really, really good. But you look at the booking, and 2 months into AEW, they book a match where if Cody Rhodes doesn't win, he can never challenge for the world title again. I mean, I see no sense in that angle unless you're going to instantly drop it in a year's time and go, yeah, Cody can now fight for the world title. You have Kenny Omega, who was apparently one of the biggest stars in the world, but all he is jazz hands. And when he's had matches in AEW, most of the things he's done have been good. But when you compare it to the ratings he was getting for his matches in Japan, it's clear the Japanese talent were lifting him to a higher level. And AEW have still struggled to fit people into, I would argue, the correct places they need to be. They still have John Moxley as a good guy. He needs to be a bad guy. Jericho's a bad guy. He needs to be a good guy. The fans don't want to boo Chris Jericho.
Yeah, it's the same problem they have with Roman Reigns. Like in WWE, just they never get right.
Doesn't always help. So we're going to move on very quickly to something that I haven't briefed you about. Is you've done in the past some wrestling training. So I want to ask you what it was like when you did your wrestling training. Like, what was the thing that surprised you about going to wrestling training?
It's a good question because I haven't actually thought about wrestling, the overall wrestling training for God knows how long. So a lot of it's actually gone in my mind. I'll just give me a minute to actually try and recall some memories.
I mean,
the best.
Do you tell the embarrassing story, or do we leave that off?
I say we leave that off because you always make it out to be a lot worse than it was, and it wasn't.
See, now we've said it, we have to tell people what it was.
Yeah, but the problem is this is going out to a much larger audience than just you and a few people who actually just know about it. You must.
Okay, how about we tell the second embarrassing story?
Which one was that? Because usually we just talk about the first one, and you talk about the first one, and I just cringe.
Okay, so we'll talk about the second embarrassing story, which is so there's a tradition in wrestling training, which is basically you try and make somebody sick, and we used to walk.
Okay, yeah, we can talk about that one. That one's not so bad.
Me, you, and David used to walk to wrestling training from the centre of town to a place called Kingcorth, which was about a 35-minute walk, 40-minute walk.
Yeah, that's one of the few good things about Aberdeen. It's not that big. You can walk everywhere if you.
Yeah. Well, we went to a McDonald's and we purchased several burgers.
Yeah, let's put it this way. This is not the best thing to do ever.
Especially
when you're just away to do some exercise.
Yeah, well, me and David, I believe we bought like a burger and chips. We needed some food in this. Because
I always buy a lot of McDonald's.
The minimum I remember was at least 3 burgers.
Yeah,
there may have been some fries in there.
There's always fries.
Some kind of milkshake or some kind of drink.
Probably a Coke.
Yeah, there was definitely something. And I do remember, I don't know if I told you this, but I was told on the way, we're going to make him sick tonight. And I was like, okay, I'm not getting involved. And he's like, no, we're going to make him sick. But everybody's going to do the same thing. But because he's eating so much, he's going to be sick.
Yeah.
One of the drills we used to run was basically where you run backwards and forwards and moves get called out. And it's not big moves like drop kicks or anything. It's ducking a clothesline, lying down, dropping down so that somebody can run over you, things like that. But just running backwards and forwards is tiring. But having to remember drop down, stuck a clothesline, all that kind of stuff. It can get more tiring. So one of the interesting things was we were doing 60 seconds and then tagging out, 60 seconds, tagging out. But you got to pick who you tagged out to. And every time we tagged out, we would tag out to you.
I didn't realize this at the time, so...
No, how many was it there? There was about 6 or 7 people there. And, well, yeah, there was about 6 or 7 people there that night. And just about everybody would tag you in. So every now and again, you'd get tagged out. And you get just enough time to get your oxygen back. And then all of a sudden, you'd be back in. And when you went to puke, I do remember, because it was a community centre, you got pushed basically to the door and pushed through the door so you could...
Yeah, there was a double door, there was a double fire exit door that we just could just open. It wasn't. I don't think it must not have been alarmed because no alarm went off when we opened it.
Yeah, we didn't get in trouble for it anyway. So now that we've sparked your memory with that, what was your favourite thing about wrestling training?
The time we did it with Len Ironside, the legend himself.
Len Ironside, a Scottish wrestling legend, which I believe, yes, I do. I have it here, which not intentional. It just happens to be right by my bed, and to be clear, also personally autographed to me because Len is a legend.
Yeah.
So Len
because of the fact Aberdeen's not that big a place, I keep bumping into him in the street every so often.
Yeah, as do we. It's great. He is somebody who, former Scottish champion. He has.
Years, I remember.
He's been being used infrequently, but he has been on WrestleZone shows here in Aberdeen. He also appears at a lot of the Legend stuff, which is quite interesting to see him and see how he interacts. I've also interviewed him, so I got to spend an hour with Len just talking about wrestling, which was absolutely amazing. What was the worst part for you about wrestling training?
You would think this one would be a lot easier to think of.
Yeah, because I mean, what's quite interesting is everybody that goes to training gets beasted. Now, do you want to explain what beasting involved when we were at training?
A lot of chest slaps.
Yeah, a lot of chops.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things, I don't know if you remember, we won't mention the guy's name, but he was getting married. Yeah, he was getting married, and we decided that his wedding present was going to be as many chops as he could physically manage from every person who was at training. And it was so bad, he was bleeding when he left. And it's basically hand chops here on the chest, but you do it in this motion. And as you're doing it, it really does hurt. I mean,
I think I did like several at one time.
Yeah, you did. I think we all did the Kobashi spot, which is you just lock your elbows, do this, and it really does suck. So for all the pain that you were put through at wrestling, all the bumps and
I didn't actually mind all that.
No, I mean,
I was a lot younger. My knees actually worked at that point, so.
Well, we did some boxing, we did some MMA stuff just to kind of learn some combat stuff, which I really enjoyed all that. I didn't mind the bumps, apart from that one time when my leg kind of blew up, and I remember kind of rolling to one side and just feeling like I wanted to cry. But I enjoyed it because the one fun thing for me was because I was videoing every session, I would take it home and I would sit and watch it, and I would get to sit and watch.
I did.
Yeah. I'd get to sit and watch it with my kids as well. So my kids were, at the time, how old would they have been? They would have been 3, 4 years old, maybe 3 years old. So my 3-year-old twins were sitting watching wrestling, and it was me that was doing it. So if I Edge, knowing that his daughter was watching him wrestle, or Kevin Owens and his son's watching him wrestle, if they're wrestling on proper shows and the feeling was even half as much as what I had, they'd be very, very pleased.
Well, it's like, you've seen on the shows, it's like Mick Foley's kids were always watching his shows, and you've actually seen some of the reactions they had. And it's like, within the past couple of years, you've had Shane McMahon being as old as he is, still doing coast to coasts. And it's like, Randy Orton, he went up and reassured his kid, he's fine, don't worry.
Yeah, so we're coming up to the end. but not quite. So we're coming up to the end of the main interview part. So we're going to do a little bit of a game. This is the part where if you want to, you can wear the mask. So it gives you a second. If you don't want to wear it, we're going to fire through some questions.
No, let's just get on with it.
Let's go over it.
I have to take off I'd have to take off my hat to put it on. I don't want to, like.
You don't want to bare your temple. I understand. I
am a hat man. I have to wear the hat.
Okay, so word association. When I say the word, you're just gonna the first wrestler that pops into your head. Okay, so over.
Again, this is where the problem. You may have to start again because this is where you put me on the spot. Names just pop up leave my head. So, okay, over. Bray Wyatt.
Bray Wyatt. Okay, underrated.
So much for quickfire, isn't it? Pass. Sorry, I can't think of anyone for this one.
Okay. Who would you say is overrated?
I want to say Roman Reigns because I don't like the guy.
I think in terms of his ability, he is talented. I just think he's not booked correctly.
Yeah, that's my opinion as well.
Okay, so last one, entertainer.
Well, I'll have to go with Braun Strowman again because the stuff he did when he was just being funny was great.
When he had a little bit of freedom, yeah.
Yeah, he needs that.
We're gonna do some either or. Okay. Now I did. You possibly saw in the other interview I did F, marry, kill.
Yeah.
And the wife agreed with my answers that we would marry Sarah Logan because the Viking stuff. But I'm not going to do the F, marry, kill with you because I realized when I did the F, marry, kill the first time, I didn't actually have a list of F, marry, kill, and I didn't prepare one this time. So we're just going to do the ords. Okay. So would you choose Bret Hart or Shawn Michaels?
That's a good one.
To me,
I know. But we all know where you'd go on this. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I would honestly probably go for the ass man. I'd go for Shawn Michaels.
Yeah. So Taker or Kane?
Taker.
Triple H or Shawn Michaels?
Triple H.
Ric Flair or Dusty Rhodes?
Dusty. You know what my dog is named.
Yes.
It's obviously going to be Dusty Rhodes.
Okay. DX or the NWO?
DX.
WWE or AEW? Seeing as you haven't seen much AEW, I think it's fair to say you probably lean more towards WWE.
50-50 at this point in time, really. If you think about how the product is coming out.
Okay, so we're going to talk about a couple of things wrestling related, and we're going to just kind of get your opinion on them. Firstly, WWE they're taping in Florida. They're doing live shows for Raw and SmackDown, but they taped WrestleMania. They taped the Raw for after WrestleMania as well. Now they've been handed an essential media pass, which means they're allowed.
I was also thinking of discussing something with you, considering what's happened to WrestleMania and how they actually set out this year. I kind of want to talk about something else with that, but you just keep going on just now. I want to say that just so I don't forget to do it later.
Okay, so they got the permit, so they're classed as essential media, which means anybody who's employed by WWE has the ability to travel. So Kevin Owens can travel from Canada. Edge can travel from, I believe he's in Carolina just now. But what came about here was WWE, apparently, Linda McMahon donated $18.5 million to the state of Florida. And then several days later, WWE were handed an essential media pass. I'm not saying it's a bribe, but $18.5 million is a lot of money for WWE to continue to be able to tape shows, putting people's lives in danger. Which brings me to my next point. Now, I'm going to read out a list of people here. And the list is quite a big one. We'll start at the bottom and work our way up. It seems like you would start at the top and work your way down. But because the bottom is the least superstar, we're going to go that way. So Epico, Primo, Leo Rush, Aiden English, EC3, Maria Kanellis, Mike Chioda, No Way Jose, Sarah Logan, Rowan, Eric Young, Heath Slater, Luke Gallows, Carl Anderson, Kurt Hawkins, Zack Ryder, Drake Maverick, Rusev, and Kurt Angle all fired. Lance Storm, Finlay, and several other agents, including Ace Steel, who's a trainer down in, and Norman Smiley from NXT, have been furloughed. So WWE planned to save about $4 million initially from these people being let go. Now, you know I like a bit of a conspiracy. You know I like a story that doesn't make a lot of sense and trying to plug the holes. Where's the sense in a company sacking people to save $4 million, but spending $18.5 million to continue running? It seems like you would just have an alternative arrangement so you don't have to run those shows. There is the suggestion that Fox and the USA Network are demanding that the live shows still happen. Apparently, their contracts require 49 live shows per year. So they have the UK tour where it's going to be pre-taped. That's one. They have Christmas and New Year where they can do pre-tape shows. So the rest of the year have to be live shows. They've already not delivered the Raws leading up to WrestleMania as live, which means WWE could face losing their TV contracts. Do you think WWE made the right call and continue running, considering all other sports have stopped? WWE is scripted sport, but do you think WWE
it's
made
sport entertainment?
Yeah, did they make the right call?
No, I actually think wrestlers don't get that much time off in general anyway. I think, considering the amount of bumps and just injuries they take, I think it'd probably be better they just have the off season essentially, just now.
I think it would have been a nice way to do it. I mean, one of the interesting.
I know they wouldn't be getting paid, but I mean, let's face it. Even if you make it onto WWE, you still have to be on top. You still have to be on the top card to actually make like the big bucks. So
yes,
wrestling is something you do for passion, not so much for money, unless you actually have.
Some of the guys at the lower end of the card run 30 grand a year, which sounds a lot.
Good to me.
Pay for your trans. You get your family at home. You still need to pay for. So I mean, it's one of those.
And you have to pay for your own insurance.
Yeah, I'm a huge wrestling fan. I made the call. I'm not watching wrestling other than old stuff. I'm not listening to podcasts. So for me, I think they should have just stopped the shows. Every other wrestling company stopped their shows. AEW pre-taped 6 weeks worth of TV. For me, I'm not going to miss out. I mean, the lockdown is stressful enough. I'm not going to worry about wrestling, particularly when we have, the WWE Network. We've just got Disney Plus, so I'm binge watching Boy Meets World a lot, which is great.
I forgot it's on there. I have to. I've also got access to it, so I should actually watch a lot. I'm just glad they have gargoyles. I know that this is an aside, but I'm glad they have gargoyles on there because gargoyles is the shit.
Well, you know what? We downloaded Girl Meets World illegally when it first started to tune in, and we got to the episode where Sean Hunter showed up, and in my head I was like, I'm done until I watch Boy Meets World again. I need to watch it from the start, and then we'll watch Girl Meets World. And then when Disney Plus came about, we watched the first season of Girl Meets World, and I just looked at the wife and went, I'm done. We're going back to watch Boy Meets World.
I don't think Girl Meets World was bad, but
it wasn't bad, but I just
Boy Meets World was a lot better.
Yeah. So you wanted to talk about something.
We can actually relate Boy Meets World back to wrestling because there was a lot of wrestlers on it.
Yeah, Vader was in it, which was
Nick Foley was in it. Mankind.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the 90s. Getting wrestlers on TV shows I believe there was an entire team. Vader was an interesting one though. If you watch the WCW Monday Nitro episode we did, Vader actually did his first appearance whilst a WCW talent, and then that character continued whilst he was a WWF talent. That's something that very rarely happens because usually a TV show has a link up with a TV station, rather than a TV company rather than with a wrestler itself. So it was kind of cool to see Vader carry on, particularly as he was playing the dad of one of the main characters. And if you're not a Boy Meets World fan, go out your way to see the Vader episode. It's hilarious, especially when Mr. Feeney basically owns him and threatens to kick his ass and he does nothing about it. So yeah, what was the point you wanted to make before we go? Because I really need to go and have my supper. I would like to say it's supper time, but it's now midnight. It's nearly a new day for me. So yeah,
Yes,
what was the point you wanted to make?
Was it? I'm assuming it was the point I was going to make about the WrestleMania.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, since they had it over 2 days,
Yeah.
why don't they do that for the future and just make it like a convention?
Well, see, WrestleMania is a convention, so you have WrestleMania Access.
Yeah,
So
but you only have it on the one day. Why not make it like a several day event?
Well, what they've done in the past few years is the Hall of Fame on one day, NXT the next, and then WrestleMania on the third. Now, back in January, I thought it'd be kind of interesting. You know how they complain that they can't do WrestleMania in other countries?
Mm-hmm.
I thought it'd be kind of interesting if they did like WrestleMania in Britain, headlined by Drew McIntyre, and then they did WrestleMania in America, headlined by Bray Wyatt or by John Cena or whoever they wanted. But kind of both shows would have a mixture of Raw and SmackDown, so that on the Saturday, the show could be broadcast. Could start at 7 or 8 o'clock here in Britain, but in America they'd get it earlier in the afternoon. But it's the weekend, so people would still be able to watch it. I definitely think.
So it's like WrestleMania 2, but executed a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's quite interesting is we went to see a stand-up show by Mark Dallas, and when I interviewed Mark Dallas, one of the things we talked about, Mark Dallas, the the promoter of ICW here in Scotland, and there is an assumption that ICW has downsized, and yeah, there is a period of rebuilding because they have lost a lot of wrestlers, but people forget the fact that ICW used to book a certain venue, and they can't book that venue anymore because it's booked up by other performers due to the fact that you have, the fire in the building in Glasgow that basically meant that the venue that a lot of bands were using isn't there to be used. Therefore, they have to go elsewhere. ICW struggled to book that venue, so they actually did Fear and Loathing this year over 2 days, and it worked very well. Fear and Loathing was done in the SECC a few years ago, where you had Drew McIntyre versus Grado in the main event, and it was a massive show. I believe the 2 nights for ICW allowed them to establish a lot more talent. I think WWE WrestleMania 7 hours long last year for WrestleMania. That's
a slog to get through.
Yeah, I mean, it's a slog getting through 3 hours of Raw. So before we go, I want to talk about one quick thing, which is Grado. Now, I love Grado. I did listen to his podcast every week, and I will catch up with it when the lockdown's over, because the lockdown for me, I'm taking a pause from modern wrestling largely, and we'll come back to it. I am keeping up to date, obviously, with everything that's happening, obviously when people got fired, and obviously the sad news that came out yesterday about Howard Finkel, who's passed away, the voice of our childhood.
I'm surprised you're not talking about the stuff that's happened with McMahon over the past couple of days.
Well, to be honest, I think the fact that Howard Finkel died is, for me, a bigger story than the corruption.
That one actually did make. I think it was probably BBC or some news outlet, because on Facebook I sometimes get one of those breaking news things, and that actually was one of them.
Well, Howard Finkel, Edge's one was the one that I think for me was the best, when he said that when they first won the tag team championships, and Howard Finkel said, "And you." Backstage, Edge said that in the dressing room, he was sitting, just kind of getting changed, and Howard Finkel walked in, and Edge basically said to him, as a child, this is one of the things I never thought would ever happen. And Howard Finkel just leaned in and gave him a hug. And he said that like, for him, that's one of those really cool moments. Somebody that he looked up to came in and gave him a hug, even though Edge was actually thanking him for what he did. But to talk about Grado, one of the interesting things about wrestling is, we were talking earlier on, you mentioned Mick Foley and the fact that he's not quite the greatest wrestler in the ring, but he tells a story and he's entertaining. Grado, for me, is somebody who, in the modern age, he's almost like today's version of Big Daddy. He's
Yeah.
not great. He's not great in the ring, but you know what? When you watch Grado, he can wrestle. He's a fundamentally sound wrestler, if not the most
Well,
technical.
he's considerably much compared to Big Daddy. Grado was live.
Yeah.
Big Daddy had one move, which was shoving guys.
For me, I think Grado is one of the. I mean, he's starting a radio show on a brand new radio station. I believe it's called Go Radio. He's doing the breakfast show. Apparently, Grado's late a lot, so how he's going to do the breakfast show is going to be interesting to see. He's also still in Scott Squad. Have you ever watched Scott Squad?
Not full episodes, but you have shown me clips of. You show me you show me a good couple of clips that he's done. You show me the one where he was proposing to his girlfriend.
There's definitely highly recommend him. But it was me and you that sat and watched the Colt Cabana and Grado stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah. Colt Cabana, it's yourself.
For me, I think the funniest thing I've seen in wrestling for years, and when I get off here just now, I'm going to go and have my supper, and I'm going to stick on the video clip that's on YouTube of Grado going to meet Colt Cabana at the airport.
Yeah.
If you're out there now, when we do the podcast and it's in the studio, one of the things we do is we always tell people they can go out and they can sit and watch something, and we'll send them to it. We give them the free link to it. Some weeks it's something that's on the WWE Network or something that's on a paid location. But definitely, I think the documentary series that features Grado going to meet Colt Cabana, I will try and get the name of it from YouTube so that we can send people there. It is called Grado and Colt, Episode 1. It's 18 minutes and 57 seconds, and it is on YouTube. What I will do is when I upload this video, I'm also going to include the link to that video. But when they meet, he brings Iron Brew, and Colt Cabana says he doesn't like Iron Brew. And this is why I mention this, because you know what? I've got this big thing about tenuous links. I've got this idea in my head that somehow you have to connect something in your show to your finale, right? So this is the video. It's going to be, the link's going to be kind of down here in the video description, right? To episode 1, episode 2, and episode 3, and everything are in there as well. So you get to see Colt Cabana and Grado meeting. I think it's the second or third time they've met. Grado meets him at the airport in his ring gear.
With a sign.
With a sign and a bottle of Iron Brew, and Grado says he doesn't like Iron Brew. Do you know who else doesn't like Iron Brew? Mick Foley. Mick Foley does not like Iron Brew. I'm sorry, but I will not allow this.
Didn't you give him Iron Brew flavored cupcakes?
I did. Well, we bought cupcakes and we were going to give you one. And we went to meet Mick Foley, and Sammy is Zoe Styles. That's her alter ego. She is the producer. Zoe Styles felt a bit nervous because she heard Mick speaking, and it was a very thick American accent. So we decided that we'd get around that by giving him your cupcake. So if you've never had Iron Brew,
I'm willing to sacrifice my cupcake for the greater good that is Mick Foley.
But do you know what he did? He took the cupcake, and he took the Iron Brew icing, and he took it off, and he ate the cupcake. I love Mick Foley, but I'm sorry. I'm not having nonsense like saying no to Iron Brew. It's not on. Actually, I'll even have Iron Brew Extra. Not that there's product placement, but I do drink Iron Brew at least once a day. But thank you.
If we're doing inadvertent product placement, did you actually try the 1906 stuff?
Yeah. So when I was down in Glasgow for my birthday just over a month ago, right before the lockdown, actually, the Thursday night I went to see the football at Ibrox, and obviously there were some restrictions, we had to wash our hands going in the building and stuff. And then the Friday morning, we were told when I went for the stadium tour that football was cancelled. So right as the lockdown was starting, I was down in Glasgow, rented an apartment. We sound posh, we really weren't. We rented an apartment, we're down there, and there's a Tesco at the end of the road, and they'd reduced all of their old style Iron Brew down to like £1.20. So we basically just stocked up, and I lived on purely that for the entire time we were in Glasgow. It was brilliant, although I had a sugar rush for about 4 days, which I'm not complaining about because I love Iron Brew. I'm not even sponsored by Iron Brew. I don't care about
trying to see about getting the sponsorship.
But
I think you would be so. It'd be like when Paul O'Grady was doing adverts for Oasis, because he just kept getting crates of the stuff. He wouldn't drink it. You wouldn't have that problem with Iron Brew, though.
Absolutely, it does not last in my house. But yeah, I do like to do those tenuous links. That's why Grado and Mick Foley have Coke
I think you used to like Iron Brew, but it's actually grown on me over the years. So there's at least that.
It's. Do you know what? When I was a kid, I thought Iron Brew tasted disgusting.
Mm.
You know what I actually said, and this is probably we've descended from wrestling to.
Oh, this is us. We always just go on wild tangents whenever we're talking.
I made a very bold statement when I was a kid. I put Dr. Pepper, Tizer, and Iron Brew in 3 drinks I would never drink. Iron Brew was my first wife's. Iron Brew was my favorite drink now. Dr. Pepper was my first wife's favorite drink, so it was in the house every day. And Tizer was a girlfriend in between first and second wife's favorite drink. So all 3 of the drinks that I said as a kid I hated and would never drink, I've basically had to drink now because they've been in my life. I hate that. But seeing as we're talking about drinks and the fact that I'm on to wife number 2, although I don't plan on wife number 3, unless Mila Kunis suddenly becomes available, or Justin Timberlake, one of the 2. Can we talk about the story from wrestling or your phobia? One of the 2 before we go.
What was the first one?
The story from wrestling that you didn't want us to mention, the wrestling training story, or one of your phobias.
Well, let's talk about the phobia, because that's actually funny. I find the hilarity. I do see the hilarity in it. But
okay.
It is something I really cannot stand being around.
Okay, so at my birthday last year, we hired a comedy club, and everybody got pizzas. What was different about your pizza?
It had no cheese whatsoever.
Why no cheese?
I cannot stand that stuff at all. I don't even like being near it.
What happened?
It's not really a phobia. It's just a really extreme dislike of it.
What did cheese ever do to you?
It wasn't so much what cheese did to me, it's what my brother tried to do with cheese. He kept trying to force feed me when I was a kid.
So that is literally it. He tried to force feed you cheese as a kid, and now you just can't take it.
Yeah, it's actually more like a familial thing, because my dad doesn't like cheese either.
No.
The only person that'll eat cheese in my house is my mum.
See, do you know what? I made this joke a couple of days ago with my wife, and I thought it was funny. But honestly, like when I hear somebody doesn't like cheese, I kind of dismiss them. So at the minute, I have you who doesn't like cheese, who, if I found that out as like one of the first sentences, I probably wouldn't continue speaking to that.
How I introduce myself to people.
Well, and then find out another one of my friends doesn't like cake and doesn't like bacon.
I actually have a recipe for bacon cake, and we should feed it to him.
Yes. Well,
actually, I say that, but we shouldn't really force feed some food to people because they're in my history.
He's not going to get an aversion to it like you have.
Yeah. Well, he's already got an aversion to it. He doesn't like bacon.
The first thing we should look at is the fact that this other friend looks like Hagrid.
Yeah.
And what famous person do you look like if he had a little bit of a crack habit?
To be fair, I don't look like him much anymore. What with the beard and the loss of hair.
Well,
there is when I was a lot younger, there was a very close resemblance to Harry P.
So I have 2 friends, one who looks like Harry Potter and one who looks like Harry.
Oh, I got another prop. You keep talking. I'll be back next week.
Do you know what? I don't have props, although technically I did. I had this, I had the bell, and I had this, I had the belt. What's your prop?
Ta-da!
Is that the one you got?
Gave me over Christmas.
Yes. Yes, we are geeky enough that we may. Actually, do you know what? We have already bought you a birthday present.
That's not. You've got so many months left for that, and you've got. Well, then again, it is how you do.
You bought your birthday and Christmas presents, I believe, in April or May. So we're roughly the same point this year. But it was good speaking to you, and hopefully your lockdown is going to be bearable over the next couple of weeks.
I'm an introvert. This is my.
This is where you excel.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll have you on again soon. And what we'll do is we'll maybe give you some homework. Because I do remember giving you homework in the past. Because you were going to play a wrestling gimmick, weren't you?
What, in this or just in general?
You were gonna play a wrestling gimmick when the idea was to run shows, which was you were going to be a guy who was stuck in the 1970s. Which was
oh yeah, I remember that gimmick now. I don't think, looking on it back now, I don't think I could actually work that one. But there are probably some other gimmicks I've got ideas for. That I have an idea for a gimmick of not so much for me, just for this is public domain. Anyone can take this idea. It's like a shamanistic character who channels like old school. Well, let's say dead wrestlers, but that's just he channels them and uses their movesets.
See, that's very reminiscent of. Do you remember Nick Dinsmore, Eugene?
Yeah.
So he did something very similar, where he didn't channel them, but he would mimic them. But if someone was almost like possessed by them, and he would take on their role, that would be kind of cool. But anyway, thank you for joining us. I will give you some homework very soon, because the wife has been doing her homework tonight, which was watching the first Vince Russo episode of Monday Nitro, which we will be adding onto a future show. Your homework, I've got an idea. And
I don't like the look of the finger waggling there. That seems very ominous.
One of the things that's really funny about wrestling is all these wrestlers that end up in movies, right? So I think you should go and you should watch a Hulk Hogan movie of your choice.
Oh God, they're all so terrible, though.
They are, but we'll exclude Rocky for obvious reasons, because Rocky's actually a decent franchise. Suburban Commando, Mr. Nanny, the Muppets one he's in. Can't remember the name of it. Muppets in Space. He's only in it briefly. Mr. Nanny or Suburban Commando, because at least Suburban Commando's got Christopher Lloyd in it.
Can we include? I don't think it was actually a movie, but can we include the short-lived TV show where he was a boat captain? I can't remember the name of that. It was I think it was like a spin-off from Baywatch.
That's the one he was filming when Mike Graham and everybody from WCW managed to get a hold of him to come in. I think we should give you these two, Mr. Nanny or Suburban Commando. Your homework is to watch one of those two movies and talk about how much fun it is. The next time we see you, you're going to have even less hair because you've watched Hulk Hogan.
No, I don't have much hair to begin with. So
there we go.
That's just why I wear the hat, people.
Yes.
Not just because I suit.
We will see you when you've done your homework. Thank you for joining us.
No problem. This is great fun.